Imagine selling your land, your business, and your future in search of safety abroad, only to discover that the promised refuge was nothing more than an illusion. This is the situation confronting many Afrikaner families who left South Africa for the United States, lured by claims of persecution and the promise of protection. Convinced that they were fleeing a white genocide, they believed America would offer stability, jobs, and secure housing. That belief was strengthened when Donald Trump, despite shutting the door on most refugees, created a special asylum route for white South Africans. Yet, the dream quickly unraveled. Instead of security, many now find themselves crammed into motels, isolated, and with no clear path forward in a land they once thought would save them. Before exploring this unfolding situation, make sure to subscribe to the African Web, where we uncover the stories other outlets often ignore. Tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. To understand how Afrikaners ended up here, we need to briefly revisit history. White settlers first reached South Africa long before the period of formal colonization officially began. Early Dutch and French migrants sailed south searching for opportunity, trade routes, and fertile land, and many decided to remain. Over time, they established farms, created towns, and laid down social and political systems that gradually shaped the foundations of what would later become modern South Africa. These settlers were not merely passing through, they built a lasting presence that changed the region permanently. Yet they did not create the land itself, nor did they create the people who were already living there. What they constructed was a system of dominance and exclusion, beginning with the forceful seizure of land and evolving into deeper racial divisions. The most damaging legislation came with the Native Land Act of 1913, which stripped Black South Africans of the right to own land in most parts of the country, reserving the majority of fertile and productive land for whites. This law meant that Black ownership was reduced to just about 7% of the country's territory, despite Black people forming the overwhelming majority of the population. It entrenched dispossession and ensured that economic power remained concentrated in white hands. By 1948, Apartheid formalized this hierarchy, solidifying white dominance over Indians, coloreds, and Blacks. Every element of daily life, from schools and hospitals to neighborhoods, buses, and even park benches, was divided. Black South Africans were turned into second-class citizens in their own homeland, denied basic freedoms and equal opportunities. Even when apartheid officially ended in 1994 and Nelson Mandela became president, the scars of this long injustice did not disappear overnight. Inequality and land dispossession continued, with white South Africans, particularly Afrikaners, still retaining control of more than 70% of farmland. Meanwhile, millions of Black citizens remained landless, unemployed, or trapped in cycles of poverty, with very few avenues for upward mobility. Fast forward to Donald Trump's second term as president in 2025, and a new narrative began to spread. One claiming that white South Africans were victims of persecution and even genocide. Influential figures such as Elon Musk amplified these claims, and Trump responded by opening an asylum pathway for Afrikaners, while at the same time rejecting refugees fleeing actual wars and disasters in other regions. What at first seemed like a fringe conspiracy theory suddenly became part of official U.S. policy, reinforcing stories of white victimhood dressed up as humanitarian concern. Afrikaners viewed this shift as a fresh chance at renewal. Many believed America would receive them with open arms, offering stable jobs, safe homes, and healthcare. They thought they would be embraced as special cases, perhaps even as people escaping injustice. But reality turned out to be very different. Instead of new beginnings, many found themselves crammed into cheap hotel rooms, with entire families of 4 squeezed into a single space, isolated without money or communication. Reports of their struggles began appearing across online communities and Facebook groups, where South Africans voiced concern over dozens of Afrikaners barely surviving day to day. One South African woman explained that some of these families were so desperate they were pleading to return home. But that route was blocked. By applying for refugee status, they had effectively locked themselves into a corner. To go back, they would need to admit publicly that their claims of genocide had been false or exaggerated. For those who had sold off farms, houses, and businesses before leaving, the reality was even harsher. They had nothing left in South Africa and no strong foundation in the United States. This left them stranded in a painful limbo, without belonging fully to either country. The irony could not be more striking. For generations, Afrikaners held dominant positions in South Africa's power structures. Now, in the US, many are reduced to working as cleaners, gardeners, bouncers, or in other low-paying jobs they once dismissed back home. Suddenly, they are the ones marginalized and struggling to fit in. In a country where whiteness is not rare but the norm, the privilege they once enjoyed has evaporated. Meanwhile, people escaping genuine war zones, from Syria, Sudan, and Afghanistan, were denied entry to the US, even though their lives were under direct threat. Afrikaners, by contrast, were prioritized, despite there being no credible evidence of a state-led genocide against them. Trump's administration painted them as victims of racial violence, embedding ideas of white grievance into the broader US political conversation. Now, they are trapped. South Africa's Department of International Relations has confirmed it cannot repatriate them, since they are legally under American protection. Unless they cancel their refugee status and admit that their claims were fabricated, there is no legal way back. But doing so would not only disgrace them personally, it would also cast doubt on Trump's immigration policies that enabled their entry. Fear of legal consequences, public humiliation, and political fallout has locked them into a state of uncertainty that feels impossible to escape. This raises a deeper question. Was this policy ever truly about humanitarian concern, or was it a calculated political strategy to serve other interests? Elon Musk, after facing resistance in South Africa over his Starlink venture, began to push the genocide narrative. Soon after, Trump echoed the claim. Was this simply a coincidence, or part of a coordinated effort that aligned corporate frustrations with political posturing? The truth is, South Africa is undeniably unsafe, but for everyone. Violent crime cuts across racial and social groups, black, white, colored, and Indian alike. But calling it genocide, directed at a single race, stretches credibility far beyond reason. If such atrocities were really happening, would we not see mass graves, global reports, and undeniable evidence? Instead, what we see is a nation still burdened by the legacy of apartheid. Land inequality remains unresolved, and attempts at redistribution often face fierce resistance, especially from those who fear losing privileges. Some Afrikaners fled under the story of persecution, but what is emerging now looks more like an escape from a changing South Africa, where their dominance was no longer assured. In this light, what we are witnessing is not proof of genocide, but rather the collapse of a myth, one built on fear, entitlement, and the resistance to share power. So the key question remains: is their suffering in America the result of broken promises, or the consequence of pushing a false narrative that has turned against them? Let us know in comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to The African Web for more stories that go beyond the headlines